Thank you guys for turning in to our first of many public land etiquette webinars. During this edition, we will be discussing deer hunting on public land. My name is Brianna Merrill. I'm the R3 Coordinator Assistant for the New Jersey Division of Fish and Wildlife. The R3 program comes from a nationwide stand on recruiting, reactivating, and retaining one of the country's most relevant dying breeds, hunters and target shooters. On September 2nd of 1937, the Federal Aid in Wildlife Restoration Act was signed by President Franklin D. Roosevelt. This act, known as the Pittman-Robertson Act, directs taxes on firearms and ammunition sales back to the individual states to fund wildlife management and habitat protection. A major decline in hunting and target shooting participation has made it harder for agencies to meet their conservation missions. So that's when we cue in the R3 program. The main objectives are providing resources and activities to new, beginner, intermediate, and experienced hunters and target shooters to keep the outdoor heritage alive. All right, now I'm going to step down from my soapbox and introduce Ryan Risher, our presenter. Ryan is the R3 coordinator for our program here in New Jersey. He is an avid hunter and public land advocate. Ryan, when you're ready, take it away.
Thank you, Brianna. First off, I want to welcome you all to another webinar that we're going to be providing to all of you tonight, where we're going to be discussing a pretty important topic that a lot of other, agencies, non-government organizations, people who, blog, things of that sort, they tend to dabble in this topic a little bit, but we wanted to be able to provide this, kind of coming on the heels of archery season opening. We felt that this time was going to be important for us to have this conversation. So what we're going to do real quick while I kind of discuss some stuff kind of leading off of Brianna's introduction is we're going to have another poll question come up. And while that poll question is up, I'm going to talk about something I think is kind of a really beneficial to what we have going on here. So, as she mentioned, with Pittman-Robertson Act, there are certain monies that get allocated towards wildlife restoration, which benefits a lot of different wildlife management strategies and species. And one thing with this topic that we're talking about tonight with white-tailed deer and hunting them on public land, there's a really nice kind of benefit that not only white-tailed deer have benefited from with wildlife restoration money, but also that is how this program to be able to provide these kind of resources basically came to fruition. So, when you look back, early 1900s, deer across the United States, North America, I think more specifically, they were decimated down to about 500,000 deer, nationwide across North America. And a lot of that was due to market hunting, the timber industry that was, decimating habitat for them. So, this is really unique that those wildlife restoration dollars benefited white-tailed deer recovery across the country. I think now they're estimated about 20 million deer across the country. And, their recovery is a really good success story for conservation when you look at not just white-tailed deer, but wood ducks, turkeys, these other wildlife species that benefited from the same exact resources that our program is benefiting from. So I wanted to kind of kick that off. Just it's really cool to be able to kind of bring that full circle. And the way we're going to kind of kick this off, when you think about the idea of public land, as the name implies, it's land that's publicly available to all hunters. And with that being said, there's this unwritten code of conduct that it's not necessarily anything rules or in law or regulatory in that kind of capacity, but it's still stuff as hunters and as responsible sportsmen we should be aware of, we should be responsible about, and we should be proactive about when we're utilizing these areas. So what I'm going to do first to kind of kick this off is I'd like to kind of provide some background about deer hunting in New Jersey and what kind of resources exist that may elevate your chance to be successful on public land before we really kind of dive into this topic. So to kind of kick this off, deer in this state are arguably one of the most sought after game species, right? So, what's very challenging for us as managers, we live in the most densely populated state that's going to have this ever increasing development, habitat fragmentation, and with having a healthy deer population, we rely on hunters to aid in our management strategies for deer. And that's why, in some areas of their range throughout the state, you may see more liberal regulations in an effort to cull the herd as a primary management strategy. That's kind of one thing to kind of keep in mind as we go through this. We're going to talk a lot about public land access, but, it's important to remind yourself in some zones, the way New Jersey is that there maybe aren't areas in certain zones that have public access available, but as we go through this, we're hoping we can kind of curtail maybe where you look to have success where those areas exist. So one thing I want to do real quick, we had a poll question there about how many deer our viewers think are harvested on public land. So Brianna, I don't know if you real quick want to share with us real quick. Okay, so what percentage of deer are harvested annually on public land? We have 50% of people thinking 50% of deer are harvested, and about a third of you say 25%, and then about 17% are saying about 10% of deer. Okay, so as I mentioned, about 45 to 50,000 deer are harvested approximately annually in New Jersey. To answer this poll question, about 3/4 are harvested on private land. And then there's that other quarter that's harvested on public land. Now, when I say public land, we're talking not only wildlife management areas, which probably from here on out I'll be referring to as WAMs. So not to trip anybody up, but just to put that out there real quick. But specifically, about 15% of that is on state land. So we're talking wildlife management areas, state parks, state forests. But to those of you who said 25%, you're right in that ballpark of being what's going to be harvested on public land. And that may incorporate county land, municipal land, state parks and forest land, federal land, or our wildlife management areas. So for those of you who got that right, gold star. Next one, Brianna, if you'd like to bring up that next question. One of the first ones we brought up was how many of you are planning to hunt public land, or if you currently do. So if we want to bring that up, we'll expand on this point. Okay, that's super encouraging to see that 96% of you either already do or are planning on. This is really great to see. So currently in New Jersey, there's over 750,000 acres of public access. That's including, as I mentioned, our wildlife management areas, which I think currently is in the neighborhood of over 340 some odd thousand acres. You throw on what's available through state parks and forests, in addition to county, municipality, federal land, there is just an absolute suite of access that's available out there. Excuse me. To put that in perspective, how much acreage that actually is, the comparison I always tell people, you think about Rhode Island. Rhode Island's one of the smallest states in our country. That's equivalent to half the state of Rhode Island. That's in the grand scheme, that's a huge amount of property that's available for you to actively go pursue whitetails on. And what's great about the fact that we have accumulated so much land that is available to hunters, it's allowed us to create a lot of really good online resources to publicize this information to our constituents' benefit. As I have here, I have this handy dandy little laser guide. If you are not familiar with our Hunting and Trapping Explorer, you can go on that, and it's a GIS application, and we have a specific platform for it that just has to do with deer management zones, deer management units, public land within those deer management zones and units that you can use at your disposal on a desktop, mobile device. You can create maps, you can save maps, you can bookmark places you're interested in going. There's a ton of opportunity that you can use to explore our public lands within that platform. Another great tool that kind of displays whether it's public access, private access, getting a hold of landowners, things of that sort. On our division's website, we also have a lot of great resources. We have a lot of our public land tabulated specifically for deer hunting, where you may know what zone you want to hunt in. We'll tell you exactly what wildlife management areas are located in that zone, what state parks and forest opportunities are in that zone. And then on top of that, you could even go to State Parks and Forestry website. It has all of their state parks and forests that are open to hunting, how much acreage of that total park is open to hunting. And it's just, again, it really kind of comes to benefit our users to have a lot of that information available, because one of the biggest barriers for hunters is that first step of just getting out there and even knowing where they want to go, right? So, if anybody has any questions about that, I'm sure we'll either be happy to answer them as we go through that, or as Brianna mentioned with our email, we'll be happy to answer that and help anybody who reaches out to us about that. Now, before I kick this off, I just want to relay this little, fun fact. As we developed this, a lot of these tips and kind of etiquette suggestions, they were derived from conversations I was having with other counterparts of mine that they do for their, state's constituents, or, we were looking and reviewing other organizations such as National Deer Association, who have these kinds of tips and etiquettes out there. So we were kind of accumulating what kinds of things stuck out to us that were going to be most important to basically relay to our deer hunters. So without further ado, we're going to kind of get into these. It's going to be 10 tips, no particular order of significance, but we want to make sure that we kind of cover all of this. So the first one that I want to touch on is, I think, a very important one for especially a new hunter or somebody new to getting into public land hunting, and that's being aware of your surroundings and knowing the boundaries of places that you're looking to go. One of the most iconic things you can look at, if you've identified a piece of property that you're interested in hunting, that we manage, is we have these wildlife management area placards that indicate the boundaries of our properties. And one thing I would suggest is especially getting an idea of the frontal boundaries of that property. What I mean by that is, especially along roadways, you can just hop in the car, you can get a general idea of that kind of frontal property. And with that being said, you're probably, as you follow these along, you're going to start to run into these private property posted signs. And, obviously this is going to indicate that now you've transitioned from state-owned property to someone's posted private property. That's why I bring in knowing the boundaries. That's going to be a super important part as you get an understanding of a certain parcel that you're interested in hunting, that you're very aware of these boundaries. And in addition to that, is you're going to want to be making yourself aware if you come across these signs, these safety zone signs, where you cannot have a loaded firearm and nocked arrow without some sort of written permission in hand. When we talk about, knowing your surroundings and being, aware of the boundaries, it's about being proactive. It's about being proactive to keep yourself not only legal for one thing, but for two other big reasons that I want to touch on with this topic. The first off being trespassing. It's your responsibility to know the property boundaries, not just for those hunting purposes, but Trespassing, as anybody out there knows, it reinforces a lot of stigmas that we as hunters already battle. And that's not just to the non-consumptive user group or the public, but even in the eye of other hunters. People who knowingly trespass, it is an eyesore, and we, as hunters are very self-policing, holding other hunters accountable for their actions. The second being deer recovery. If you know you're going to be hunting really close to a property boundary, which you legally can do, but you shoot a deer or you harvest a deer, that deer ends up somewhere that you cannot legally go to recover it. It's going to be your responsibility to make sure that you are not putting yourself in a spot that you're going to have to be reactive in how you go about recovering a deer. And just assuming that if you are trailing a deer and it ends up on a private piece of property, that they're just going to go let you do it. That's not always the case. So one of the big things I want to touch on here is to be proactive about shaking hands and at least trying to make an attempt to interact with surrounding landowners. Whether it's a residential area, it's a farm, whatever the case may be, try to make some of those contacts to explain, I'm going to be hunting public land here. I understand you're one of the property boundary owners. In the event that I harvest a deer, am I going to be okay with your permission to contact you to go legally recover my deer? You don't want to put yourself in a situation, where it's 8:30 at night, you've shot a deer at, 5:30, 6 o'clock, whatever the time frame may be. You're tracking that deer, you're getting yourself excited that this deer is just, he's got to be here somewhere. And the worst thing you can come across is a safety zone, a posted sign, a survey marker that creates a block for you to go recover your animal. A lot of people end up putting themselves in this situation, and it's an unfortunate situation to be in, but you have to be mindful of having those appropriate conversations prior to this. You want to be as proactive as you can and not have to put yourself in a reactive situation. You don't want to assume that a landowner is going to allow you to go do this, or that we get information passed along where somebody tries to call law enforcement that a landowner is not allowing them to enter their property to recover a deer. You are responsible for making that effort and ensuring from the beginning, if you harvest or make an attempt to harvest a deer, that you can go recover it. And with that being said, from the deer recovery aspect, say you make a shot on a deer, and you may be in the you may have to call in a deer tracker or a dog tracker. They're in the same position as we're talking about. They're not going to go crossing over boundaries to help you out to recover something that you are legally not able to. They're going to want that same information that you are within the rights to cross different boundaries of adjacent properties to go legally recover that deer. So with that being said, make sure you're taking plenty of time to scout the boundaries. You may even find out in places that you're thinking about hunting, you may find some kind of predictable corridors that after you take a shot, a deer may end up running, and that may give you some general idea of where that deer may go in proximity to boundary properties. So be aware of your surroundings, know the boundaries. The second one I'm going to talk about is kind of more, I would like to hope, a more intuitive one. And it's leaving no trace and leaving these areas that you're hunting better than you found. And this goes for a few different things. I think we always think about this in terms of trash. But this goes a little bit beyond this. Obviously, hunters don't like seeing other trash left behind, either by other hunters or the public who utilizes wildlife management areas and just decide, it's not my problem, I'm just going to leave it here for somebody else to deal with. We don't need that kind of ammunition, for our hunting population. So, it goes along that sentiment of, if you see this kind of stuff, don't leave it where somebody else has now the opportunity to see it. Just pick it up, just leave it better than you found it. Aside from trash, though, think about other things that you may utilize throughout the hunting season. If you're using scent wicks or scent drags, stuff of that sort. You don't want to be walking through the woods and it looks like there's a bunch of Christmas ornaments hanging from tree limbs because hunters got complacent or they got lazy, just leaving scent wicks hanging up and stuff like that. When those expire or you're done with them, just make an effort to get rid of those types of things. And the final thing I'm going to talk about is gut piles. So we all know as hunters, and if you're a successful hunter and you are able to recover a deer, we all have this process of harvesting the animal is kind of the easy part, and then all the work comes after, right? And that first part of that is field dressing that animal. You want to try to be a little bit more aware to where and how you are disposing of those contents. You want to do it, if you're doing it somewhere, I would hope that's not a little bit more obvious, but if you have to, cover stuff up by leaves or, try to, spread it out to where, predators might be able to get on it quicker, clean it up quicker. Try not to make an effort of, doing this along like really active, high traffic areas such as trails, and try not to do it, right along like a parking lot, So after we discussed leaving no trace, leaving things better than you found them, the next point I want to talk about is having a plan B or even a plan C if your initial plan A is not doable. And this is, when you think about, we all kind of have those areas that we really like to hunt. We get really kind of dead set on hunting throughout the course of the season, but with us hunting public land, we are bound to run into other hunters occasionally in proximity to those areas that we prefer. And I think some hunters out there, we get this idea that we get that like this is my spot mentality. You kind of claim stake to it, but we have to remember with it being public land, there are times we may get beat to that preferred spot that we want to hunt. So you don't want to necessarily allow yourself to either be committed to one location and just kind of go with that no matter what. You want to have multiple spots in your back pocket, not only because you don't want to necessarily run the risk of potentially sabotaging your own hunting experience, but you don't want to do that for other hunters if you happen to run into them while they're already out. That's just a simple situation. You want to just kind of make a U-turn and make sure you have another spot available in your back pocket. And there's a couple of reasons for this too. One thing that we often hear about is instances where hunters may put up several stands to give the illusion that there's more people hunting in an area than there actually are. And again, from an etiquette standpoint, this is just something where you want to obviously not be overcrowded with people, but you don't want to necessarily try to exclude others from hunting if they're going to be within reason of being not right on top of you. And there's actually some states out there that outlaw this, where if you're hunting public property, you are limited to one stand and one stand only, because they want to kind of counter that type of behavior. And the other part of this, when you're thinking about, say you roll up to a spot that you're planning on hunting and somebody's there, and it may be kind of frustrating because you were dead set on going. There's been a lot of situations out there where this has actually, oddly enough, benefited somebody, where they end up having to go to a plan B spot or a plan C spot and end up, with a successful day harvesting something. So, you just want to try to be flexible about that and, always keep your options open. Again, always have a plan B. The next one I want to touch on is a really, really important one. And I would admit to say this is probably one of the more obvious ones we're going to discuss as far as etiquette goes. If it's not yours out there in the woods, do not touch it. As you go on to scout public land or hunt public land, just like you're liable to come across other people's, stand locations, you're probably going to come across, trail cameras that they may have out, ground blinds that they have out. you know, one of the best pieces of advice I can give in these situations, and we're all guilty of ending up on other people's cameras accidentally. I always try to make some notes or some drop pins of where I've located people's stuff, just to give myself some sort of buffer to not sit up too close to them, and try to give, just try to give some elbow room, where it's doing everything, and take into consideration where I have located their stuff, just so, as I maybe go on to find a location of my own, I would consider maybe how they're getting there, how they're traveling, from a parking lot or an access point to their location. So I may not have to go walking right through their setup and potentially, sabotaging the area that they're hunting. Because obviously we don't want to do that. But another part of this that's really important, when you talk about, vandalism, sabotaging people's equipment, there's two other components to this. One of those being, legitimate hunter harassment. If you look at our statute in Title 23, it really plainly outlines what exactly hunter harassment is. One of those being, vandalization and destruction of property. And the other part of that, if you hear about, situations where, people have their ladder stands or their tree stands, sabotaged, there's a real physical element to harming somebody there, which, has its own consequences associated to that. So just plain and simple, if it's not yours, do not touch it and leave it be. There's instances, I've left notes, on people's stuff if I've accidentally gone across a trail camera. I just, if I have something available to kind of write, I'm sorry for, coming across this, something like that, just to, again, just try to take a little bit of ownership of that and, kind of move forward and onward into the woods for a new spot. So with midday scouting, this is one I think maybe some people overlook, and I think I would say this is a little bit more in tune to hunting whitetails as opposed to other species, say, turkeys and waterfowl, where, I think oftentimes we want to be scouting for them when we know they're going to be in a feeding area or they're going to be coming out of an area that they roost, or, some situation like that. With deer, because, they tend to be more active, in that kind of early dawn to dawn time frame, and then, kind of right before dusk into the evening. You don't really have necessarily that same option, and with obviously deer being a lot more skittish in some circumstances, to that kind of human encroachment, you don't necessarily want to do that in an area you're planning on hunting, right? Because you don't want to blow out the area, you don't want to have deer not return, because then you're going to be setting up in an area, and then your expectations are going to quickly dwindle when you are going days without seeing any activity. So if you have the ability, you want to try to take it upon yourself to do some midday scouting. So say that 10 to 2, 10 to 3 time frame, if at all possible, to look for sign, look for funnels that deer may be traveling, for food sources, stuff like that. And then also, any sort of work you need to do, whether it's baiting, hanging tree stands, cutting limbs, just getting some, more eyes on the terrain, anything of that sort, try to take that opportunity during midday. And one of the things that's going to benefit you doing this is you're going to be less inclined to run into somebody who's actively hunting. So you're not only going to benefit, the area that you're considering hunting, but you're going to benefit other people who may be hunting in proximity. Now, the next one I want to talk about is a little bit of a different one, and it's, when we hear, topics come up about overcrowding in areas and hunters being right on top of each other, obviously, a lot of us go into the woods to get away from other people, but in some situations, that may not either be feasible or, depending on the size of the wildlife management area, there may be some sort of threshold. We may have to kind of be okay with having people closer to us than we would typically like. So what I mean by this is, you may have one wildlife management area. Say, for example, here, handy dandy laser, we got Honey Run. It's about 134 acres. On the right, we have Peak West. The difference, and let me just mention real quick too, Peak West, a lot larger than Honey Run. It's about 5,200 acres. We have two different things going on. We have one kind of continuous block of property, just one access point. With Peak West, on the other hand, we have a lot of different access points, a lot of different non-continuous blocks, some bigger parcels mixed in, but a lot of different opportunity here. Now, you may be inclined, if you were to say at Honey Run, which that's a lot smaller piece of property, to be able to live a little bit more with somebody being 150, 200 yards away from your stand, as opposed to a place such as Peak West with a lot more area for people to disperse on. And one thing I think that's worth noting with this, with our Hunting and Trapping Explorer, it has these really nice features to look at actual topography and look at the slope of the terrain in an area you might be hunting. So for example here, with Honey Run, all these darker reds, same thing goes for over here with Peak West. A lot of these darker reds are indicating, you're kind of having this really strongly sloped area in the terrain. So it's kind of coming down maybe off a saddle or a ridge, some sort of landscape feature like that. And you can use that to kind of get an idea of maybe where deer might be funneling out of. I mean, you see some of these contours that come down, and what they ultimately do is come down to this creek bottom here on this example and kind of come out. So you can reasonably assume, based on some of these landscape features too, not only where deer are going to be traveling, but more likely where you may be coming into contact or observing other hunters, deer stands, blinds, anything to that effect as far as equipment goes. So you can reasonably assume and kind of predict where people might be. And the same goes for Peak West. Really nice kind of funnel that comes down to here. But again, you have a lot more of these like continuous blocks with some landscape features to them and stuff. So with this being said, you can kind of use the terrain and how deer may move throughout the landscape to not only predict maybe where they're traveling to and from, but get a better idea of where you're more likely going to probably run into hunters' tree stands or their blinds, and again, kind of give yourself more of a visual as far as where they're going to be accessing from, how they're maybe approaching their stand, and how you need to, move away from there and set up accordingly. Moving on to the next point. It looks too good to be true. Maybe it is. Now, what do we mean about this? Say you've picked any wildlife management area. Just here, for example, I have Greenwood Forest Wildlife Management area. This could be any wildlife management area that you're interested in hunting. A lot of areas, when you get there and you park, or you just get off on the side of the road to an area maybe you're looking about hunting, or you've looked at certain elements of maps that we have, or our Hunting and Trapping Explorer, whatever kind of satellite imagery you've looked at. You're going to find that a lot of areas tend to have this curb appeal, right? And what I mean by that is you may find areas a couple hundred yards from the parking lot or a pull-off point that, you pull up on it and you hike in, you're like, this looks like a pretty sweet spot. Like, I think I might hunt here. And then what happens, you go 50 yards more, there's a tree stand or a ground blind. You go another 100 yards, there's a tree stand or a ground blind, and you get frustrated thinking like, I thought this was going to be something I found, I was going to be able to set up on, and that unfortunately is not the case. You got to think outside the box. Say, you find an area that looks attractive, promising deer, habitat. You come across this great run going into a really thick area. It's only 200 yards from a parking lot. There's probably a good chance that you are not the first person to see. So you got to start thinking outside the box. Think about what's on the other side of this deer trail. How far does this deer trail go to where now I'm going to get outside of the normal limits of the average hunter willing to hike in to get exactly where these deer are going, and not just traversing in the middle of the night in proximity to how close it is to a parking lot. There may also be times you come across something like this and you start finding, residual cat eyes and, markers that lead to either an old deer stand or one that's actually being currently used. You got to, tread carefully a little bit about that where, you're going to have hunters who intentionally don't maintain cat eyes because they don't want to maybe give away a location that they're still currently using by updating them, putting up fresh cat eyes. You're likely going to come across areas that have historically been used and they still may be. So you want to think about other, sign, not just deer sign, but other hunter sign that you may be coming across, just to, kind of make note of to, hopefully avoid any future, confrontation or complication where, you may get yourself situated and then end up right on top of somebody and end up having to move. Going off of that and kind of touching a little bit back on the idea of, hunter density, the situation arises, and what I mean by this is, when you hunt public land, you're going to come across situations that necessitate communicating with people you don't know. And you have to be willing and proactive to do that, I think. I think there's a stigma out there about public land. We always hear the horrors of public land, dealing with somebody who's unethical or, unwritten to this kind of code of conduct we're talking about, that, it creates a bad experience for other hunters out there. And it creates this negative idea of how we interact with other hunters. And I think it creates kind of this false barrier for new hunters where they hear all of the negative. And they don't hear about a lot of the positive interactions that are possible, that happen out there, that you can simply avoid just by being civilized enough to have a conversation with somebody, whether it's in a parking lot or that you run into, in the woods. Good example, I was hunting a piece of public property this past spring turkey season, and I pulled up to a parking lot. I was there, I was getting my stuff ready, and somebody else pulls up. And he's like, were you planning on hunting here? And, whereabouts were you looking to go? And, we had both scouted the same birds. And he was like, well, that's where I was thinking about going. I was like, oh, look, sorry, I got here and, we had a civilized conversation. He's like, look, I get it. You were here first and everything. He's like, but do you still mind if I hunt you? And I was like, look, here's my number. I would appreciate it if you don't set up right on top of me. Let's try to, get on either side of the birds. If they come to me, they come to me. If they go to you, they go to you. I can only hunt here a couple of hours. I'll let you know when I leave if you want to come over this way. And that was the end of our conversation. There was nothing where it was uncivilized, like, this is my spot, I beat you here, like, go somewhere else. You got to be able to have those kind of conversations with people, because again, you never know who you're going to be running into. And, you may be running into new hunters out there who they don't have the skill set or the knowledge or the wherewithal, that they may be unintentionally doing something wrong. And you need to be able to, approach people like that to, kind of give them some of that situational awareness, and just, kind of remind yourself, a lot of us were there at some point, and, we have to treat each other a little bit more reasonable when situations like that come up. It can be as simple as leaving a note in your windshield just to at least notify somebody if they're curious to kind of look and see maybe where you're going to be out there. So, it opens up a line of communication even without having to necessarily talk to somebody, but it helps you both figure out who's going to be doing what potentially, to where you're not going to have some sort of overlapping scenario that may ruin both of your hunts. One important thing I wanted to talk about with this slide, it's not resenting others' success of a legal harvest. We tend to, I think, as the hunting as hunting has grown, and this is a little bit anecdotal, there's no support out there, with evidence to support or refute this in any sort of primary literature, right? But there's anecdotal evidence out there, and a lot of people want to cast blame on social media and forums and all these other outlets where people want to inquire for help or assistance, or to kind of show off them being proud of their own successes. That a lot of people unfortunately get kind of raked over the coals because their experience doesn't line up with the experience that someone else out there is looking to have. And I think at the end of the day, I think we all need to be really conscious of the fact that we shouldn't be so concerned with someone else's success out there in proximity to us. And whether it's the same piece of public property or the same zone or the same regionally specific area in the state, I think we tend to hyper focus on the endpoint. What I mean by that is, what was the outcome of their hunt? How big was the deer they harvested, in relation to deer I'm after, or that fit my own expectations? I think we need to be a little bit more understanding and aware to respect other people's skill levels, the amount of work that they did or did not put into a hunt, their own due diligence of scouting, preparing a site, that ultimately led to their own success and their own experience. I think we could all do a better job of that, and that's something I really want to drive home with this presentation. And I would hope this is something we could all take away from this, especially. So I have a couple more points that I want to bring up. The next one is knowing the rules and regulations before you go. And this fits into this unwritten etiquette that we've been discussing. In the sense of we're talking about public land deer hunting, right? But you have to be aware of other overlapping seasons. Thinking about land use regulations, and not just in what applies to hunting related rules and regulations, but having a general idea of how different public parcels have different land use regulations, as far as where you can legally hunt, how you can legally hunt, what you can and can't do as far as manipulating vegetation, what you do and don't need as far as legally accessing properties. These are all things you should familiarize yourself and be self-aware about. Think about carry in, carry out policies, as we mentioned. Just kind of leaving parcels better than you found them. Taking trash with you. Considerations as far as how you access places, parking policies. Whether there are access points that you can and can't access, or where you can and can't park. And then also, reporting things, whether it's violations you are actively or you passively see in passing, how you have to report, successful harvest at the division, or it's, a county or municipal property or some other sort of private entity that allows access to the public, being familiarized with how, you have to, report to them, to make sure that they're also gaining, the information that they need. Another great example, when you comparatively look, with public access, when you look at wildlife management areas versus state parks and forestry land, wildlife management areas, we have, legal Sunday hunting on for archery. State parks and forests, that doesn't exist. Now, you don't want to get yourself jammed up over little nuances like that, and potentially, unfortunately get yourself in trouble over something like that, or just run the risk of, putting yourself in a position where, you drive an hour, you're jazzed up to go hunt on Sunday afternoon, just to remember that that's not an area that's accessible, as far as how their policy operates. So again, you want to be as proactive as you can to think about how, these areas that you're looking to access, how, there's going to be regulations and policies that affect all of them the same, but then they're also going to have their own little outliers of things that you want to be mindful of. And with that being said, I did want to put this up here, as far as, the work our conservation police officers do. If you encounter any sort of violations that you see, whether it's dumping, it's, hunter harassment, or it's some sort of illegal take of wildlife, we have here listed all of the different phone numbers that will be available. If you see any of this, that you can call them, report this stuff. We also are providing this other number for Operation Game Thief. It's an anonymous, tip number that you can reach out to, report things that, one thing I always try to tell people with other programs that we do is, with the amount of land that we manage, we can't be in every place at one time. I value the fact that a lot of our hunters, our anglers, our constituents are self-policing in the sense that I think a lot of them are good about holding themselves accountable and being mindful to hold, other hunters accountable, to where, we don't want to be branded the same way as people doing things in the wrong. So it's good to have these numbers on hand if you do see anything. We appreciate any sort of insight or things that can lead off our conservation police officers to, protect the resource and enhance it for people who are doing it legally. And with that being said, I'm going to leave off on this note. Just think about overall being a conscious hunter. We talked a little bit in this about, kind of prioritizing your safety, whether it's, knowing the boundaries, and I say safety and, a physical capacity of keeping yourself safe, being communicative with other hunters, or maybe it's family members, to let them know where you're going to be, or it's leaving a note in the windshield, and God forbid something happens and, we or our law enforcement get a call that somebody didn't come home. They see, your vehicle somewhere at a parking location. There's a note there that says where you're going to be hunting, just to, again, open up that line of communication that if something happens, you're prioritizing your safety to where, we can better do something to, help a hunter out in maybe a bad situation. But on the flip side of that too, when we talk about safety, think about just, the legality part of it, where, you want to be proactive about boundaries and knowing your surroundings. And I've talked a lot about this, practicing being proactive, and whether it's identifying those boundaries, identifying other hunters maybe in your vicinity, scouting, whether it's midday or through aerial imagery, anything of that sort, understanding the rules and regulations, just practicing that proactiveness is going to, as you get in the woods, it's going to alleviate some of that, angst of getting out there and maybe feeling a little bit, uncomfortable about what exactly you got going on out there. And kind of building off those two, is practicing, that responsibility of being a good steward as a hunter out there. If you're seeing trash, just making an effort to pick it up, or if you're running into somebody that just maybe isn't doing something that fits, some sort of, lawful regulatory thing, or it's just, again, an unwritten, component of etiquette, to try to extend that olive branch to educate them on that, excuse me. Because, at the end of the day, we should all kind of be doing that, as stewards for what we do on public land. And that brings me to my last point about promoting this public access. There's a ton of successful deer hunters out there that strictly just hunt public access and hunt public property. And, there shouldn't be, I think, the barriers that exist for some hunters because they constantly hear a lot of the negative. I think we need to do a better job of highlighting a lot of positive experiences we have out there to promote how beneficial they can be to our constituents and anybody out there who's utilizing these resources. I thought it'd be cool to show a photo. So I really enjoy hunting public access. A few years ago, I had made kind of a goal to, I really enjoy hiking Oregon State Forest. Always wanted to harvest a deer in there. Kind of made a goal a couple of years ago to start scouting and understanding a little bit more of the layout. And I was able to, harvest this really nice doe in there. So if anybody's watching out there who is like, I don't know where to start on public land, I can say, as long as I've been hunting for now 20 years, and only a few years ago, I stepped onto a new piece of property. In a couple of years, I was able to, be successful. I would say if I can do it, there's a lot of you out there that can as well. So I appreciate your time. Thank you again.